Okay, we are on page 49 and bottom paragraph. And as always, David, anything you want to recap, set up context? No, nothing. Okay. No, sure. Or, hey, I know you got something to say. Get in
No,
here.
not really. I mean, actually, because all he's talking about. So page 47 and 48, he's talking about letting go of all our ideas, setting up this page here, right? He's talking about our prejudices and all the things that we need to lay aside. We got to have new thinking, and as I know it today is like when it comes to relationships, God of my own understanding, which my own understanding of God is I don't have an understanding of God. But Bill's trying to really pound it in our head that all our old thinking has to change. All of it has to change. And I don't have the ability to do that. The steps are designed one particular way to get me to God. That's what they're for. That's what the steps are designed to do. And Bill uses all kinds of different capital letters in this thing, synonyms of God. On page 49 in the top of the paragraph, he talks about all power, guiding, creative intelligence. Talks about in the next paragraph, being instead of regarding ourselves as an intelligent agent, spearheads of God's everlasting creation. So direction we're supposed to be headed. This is the direction we're supposed to be headed. He's giving us hints and showing us the path. And now we're really going to, this next paragraph is going to show us more about what the path looks like of the first 100.
Okay. And everybody, definitely, if you can, please come on camera. We know Ludi is tucked into bed, so he's exempt. But anybody else, if you can come on camera, we like to see your beautiful faces. Okay, here we go. Page 49, bottom paragraph. We who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves.
I did have two definitions here. I had dubious, which is defined as questionable. So we who have traveled this questionable path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. And then I also had another definition. I don't know exactly how it might fall into the sentence, so maybe you guys could go into it if it makes sense to you.
Sure.
But I had frailties, which is described as a fault or a sin due to weakness in character.
Human weakness.
Human
Yeah.
weakness.
So it's that what that sentence is saying that, you know, and David and I'll get more into this, but specific to that sentence, it's basically saying we've learned that whatever the human weaknesses of various faiths may be, so when people of faith have not lived up to the faith, irrespective of that, we don't throw out, you know, we don't let the whole bushel of apples get spoiled by one bad one, right? We're saying there's still plenty of wonderful stuff in faith. Don't let any hypocrites or people who fell off their faith tarnish what's being said here. Go ahead,
Cool.
David.
Okay, so he starts out with a we with a comma, so we know we're talking about the first 100 when Bill's talking about that in that paragraph. And then they travel this dubious, questionable, uncertain, debatable path. And then we beg you to lay aside prejudice. Bill uses the word beg you a couple times in the book. He uses it on page 58. We're all familiar with how it works. On page 58, bottom of the page, in the third paragraph, it says, with all the earnestness of our command, we beg you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Bill's begging us. They're begging us to lay aside our prejudice, our preconceived thoughts, or our opinions on religion. It doesn't, like, maybe I had an upbringing of a lot of religious studies, but I had to let go of those things too, because men of faith are men of courage, right? So my connection to that thing needs to change. I got to let go of some of my old ideas about that stuff. I had some situations in my life that were religious that really turned me off to religion altogether. This is not a religious program. Religion is about a bunch of spirituality is about disciplines, and religion seems to be about a bunch of rules. And at the same time, religion is not a bad thing because religion doesn't start wars. Although it seems like a lot of our wars are religious wars, people start religious wars, right? So it's not the religion that's bad, because the religion are beliefs or traditional doctrines of a religion. That's what that really is. So we have learned, so this is in past tense in the next sentence there, that whatever the human frailties are, so frailties, those weaknesses, imperfections, faults arising from the human weakness of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and directions to millions. My grandmother was one of the most spiritually fit people I've ever met in my life. I lived right across the street from her as a child till I was in my teenage years. She was spiritually fit every single day. She wasn't an alcoholic. She practiced principles all day long in her life. She was a great demonstration. There's many great demonstrations of our life. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. They seem to know what life is all about being useful, to be maximum service to God and all his kids. And actually, we used to have no reasonable conception of whatever. I had no real conception of God. I still have no real understanding of God, because if I understand God, he's not a powerful enough God. But I have a conscious contact with God. I maintain one with step 11, and we used to amuse ourselves by cynically or critically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed them. Many spiritual-minded persons of all races and colors and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability. That's what they're doing. I got to lay aside my old prejudice of what I think religion is or what I think spirituality is. Their happiness, their usefulness. Isn't that kind of the keys of life, which we should have sought ourselves? But what was I blocked from? I was blocked from my ego. I was blocked from my unmanageability, from fear, from selfishness, from resentment. All these things that I don't have the power to remove anyways in my life. I don't have the ability to do any of those things, the same way as I didn't have the ability to do step 9 when I first walked into the rooms. Those steps are designed in a particular way, linked together, 1 into 2, 2 into 3, and 3 into 4, and so forth and so on. And I will get the ability that I need from a power greater than myself. Everything goes back to step 1. What is my step 1 today? What am I at today in step 1? Do I see that my life can I stay sober on my own power? Can I not pick up a drink? And do I need a spiritual awakening? That's the question. And if I do, then my actions will tell me what I believe. Do I believe I need to live in the 10 step all day long? Meaning I start the clock when I wake up, and the clock doesn't stop until I go to sleep. That's the 10th step all day long. And then I get to maintain conscious contact with God in 11. Then I get to have the awakening in 12. And that's the promise. And then I get to carry this message. That's the charge to alcoholics who still suffer. And then I get to, and the challenge is I get to try to practice these principles in all my affairs. Mm. Man, that's living life like Mark Houston says. How free do you want to be? Mm. That's the question. How free do you want to be? My beliefs tell me today that I want to be free of the body itself. That's my problem.
So let's just make sure everybody's, I've said it probably quite a bit in this chapter. The language in We Agnostics is a little, I think it's a little flowery at times. Bill uses these lofty expressions and words. I just want to make sure everybody understands what he's saying here. So it says, we who've traveled this dubious path. The dubious path was what was mentioned in the previous paragraph, that, instead of regarding ourselves as basically agents of God, children of God, we believe that our human power drove everything in the world, right? So that's why I'm saying the dubious, questionable path, right? So those of us who believed humans drove everything, begging of you to lay aside prejudice, right? And we were asked to lay aside some prejudice a couple of pages ago too. So what we're learning is we study this book, and as we start to recover right here in the second step, is we have to put in some effort. We have to come to step one. We have to understand step one. And if I understand step one, I know that I'm powerless, and therefore I can start to become willing to believe in some power in two, which is really what we're talking about. So God does not instantly, though, wave a magic wand over me in this moment and enable me. He doesn't strip all prejudice away. I must try. I hate the word try. I must begin to make an effort to lay aside prejudice. And what happens is I start trudging up that steep hill, going uphill. The more effort I put into it, the more God gets behind me and propels me, right? So laying aside prejudice will ultimately result in removal of prejudice. And we know this because we always go back to page 27. Where do those prejudices live? In my belly. Those are my reactions. Those are my attitudes. And Dr. Jung promised us that those thoughts, those emotions, those attitudes are going to get cast aside, right? The prejudices will go away, but I have to put some effort into driving them out too. And as I mentioned when Sam was asking for help with that definition, we've learned that whatever the human weaknesses of various faiths may be, those faiths are given purpose and direction to millions. So, okay, people in the name of faith, we've seen this. We see this every day in the news. The news is so awful sometimes, right? That people do really awful things in the name of faith. So what we're being asked here is to not sit in that. Don't perseverate on that. Let it go and keep in mind all the great stuff that can come from faith and organized religion. Okay? People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Yeah, and that's what we're developing here in recovery. We're getting a logical idea of what life is all about. What is that logical idea? That there's something bigger than me, that I am not intended to run the show, that when I am being the director, I burn my life down in the lives of everyone around me. The logical idea is there's something bigger that can save my tail. And to show some gratitude to that, I figure out how to serve that higher power. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissect. Okay, so this is just us being sort of, intellectual assholes. Oh, talking this and what you believe is wrong and God doesn't exist and all this stuff, right? But in fact, what was happening that we had our eyes closed to is this last part here, right? We might have observed, instead of being jerks, instead we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds, so everybody, irrespective of our circumstances or how we were born, were demonstrating a degree of stability, just the opposite of how I was prior to recovery. I was highly unstable. Happiness, opposite of how I was. I was terribly discontented. And usefulness, opposite of how I was. I was of no use to anyone, right? Which we should have sought ourselves. Why didn't we seek that ourselves? Doesn't matter. We talked about this last week. There's never a satisfactory answer to a why question. Did you feel this way? Were you a jerk like I was a jerk, tearing down other people's belief systems, even though they were stable, happy, and useful? This is certainly how I existed. Top of 50. Instead, we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing.
I have the definition of condemnation. I can never say that word right.
Yeah, you got it.
Well, really condemn, because condemnation
Right.
didn't have a good definition. Yep. So to pronounce, to be wrong, to disapprove of. So in the sentence, instead we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale disapproval.
Let me start us off here, David, because I want to just continue this thought. So what this paragraph is talking about, it's continuing this idea that we were rejecting faith and people of faith because of things that we saw people doing in the name of faith, or just a person who was, part of an organized religion or faith that did things that we didn't like or didn't agree with, right? So it's saying we looked at the human defects of these people of faith, and sometimes use their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. What that means is, I see Sam, and I know Sam goes to church and she wants to be involved in her religion. But, I find out, I don't want to say, I don't know, Sam, it's too many traffic tickets, which is probably something that Sam had, right? And oh, well, Sam breaks the law and she gets these parking tickets and she never pays them. So, what kind of good Christian, Jew, Buddhist, whatever is she? So I say, well, if her church puts up with that, what's the point of any of it, right? Wholesale condemnation because I'm picking on the shortcomings of somebody, right? Which is ridiculous generalization. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. Okay, so now, and I like what Bill's doing here. Bill is talking about the things that we do on controversial topics without really getting into controversy, right? Because we don't do that in AA according to our traditions, right? No opinion on outside matters according to traditions. But what he's saying is something that a lot of us can agree with. He's not saying, oh, we were intolerant of Catholics or intolerant of Jews or anything like this. He's just saying we were intolerant. We didn't tolerate. We didn't accept other people and their defects, and therefore we didn't accept their belief systems. We use this as an excuse to tear down. Right? And we talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. Of course, that's my defining characteristic was intolerance, right? Maybe more than anything. If it wasn't dear to me, and if I didn't think of it, it was garbage, right? Didn't matter. It had no value. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. So you guys have heard this expression before, right? You miss the forest for the trees. So the analogy is, what's a forest? It's this big thing in nature. It's filled with many, many trees, dozens, hundreds, thousands of trees. And when you stand back, like I got almost 3 acres out here on my property, and I look back and it's beautiful. It's all these trees. It's even beautiful in the winter with the snow on them, right? It's beautiful. Now, if I walk up on them, what am I going to see? I'm going to see a couple of trees that have come down. They're in the way. I need to chop them with my chainsaw. I got some other ones that got, they're infested by a bug. It's ugly. I'm focusing on these little aberrations instead of the majesty, the totality of this beautiful thing. Right? So that's the metaphor he's using to carry how we look at people, and we pick on people instead of looking at all of the people banded together in their wonderful spirituality. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. Well, how could we? How could we if this is how we were carrying on, if this is how we were thinking, feeling, and reacting?
Yeah, Mike, the first part of that paragraph, you did a great job. I have nothing to add to that. But the second part is when we get talking about we miss the reality of the forest, the beauty of the forest because we diverted by the ugliness of the trees. What's the purpose of a forest? And, David's described it really well, but it's the forest is a forest protection to all beings. Everything in the forest is protected by the forest itself, right? But I'm so focused on the things in front, and I'm a hypocrite. That's really what I am, I'm a damn hypocrite. Because you got all these tickets. Well, Christ's sake, it's just like people who get sober and then they frown on other people who drink, and they get mad at people who go back out again. Are you freaking kidding me? I understand the first step. I never give up on the new guy. I never give up on the chronic relapser. I spend a lot of time wasted working with them. Sometimes I do. But the bottom line is I understand the first step, so I am not a hypocrite. I do not frown upon people who can drink sociably and have a couple of drinks, or for the chronic relapser either. He is a sick person, spiritually ill. The spirit is not sick. He has a malady. So I don't give up on them. Then the last sentence there says, we have never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. So Bill's talking about some religion here in the prior paragraph. He's talking about exercising our faith. And for us to get from fear to faith, we have to have some courage. All men of faith are men of courage. And so I never gave the spiritual side of life a fair shake. Never. Open up my mind to what we're asking you to do here. And the bottom line here, all we're asking you to do is to be willing to go to any length. If you want a life, if you want to recreate your life, the book is clear on what it says. Recreate your life. My life looks nothing like it did when I first got here. it's just, I can't even describe. If we would have to sit here for hours on end if I was going to tell you what my life was like, what it's like now. And then the next paragraph, just a little spoiler alert, then it's going to talk about what we should be talking about all together in meetings too, and with at the podium.
I have to think. I did chuckle at one thing David said. He said, "All we're asking you to do is be willing to go to any length," right? Which is really, it's true. And it's easy to say a couple decades in, 24, 25 years for David in, because we were, and we are. But that's a tough message to the newcomer, right? But when do I become willing to go to any length? I understand and agree with the first step. And by the way, nobody has to. Everybody who comes to 12-step recovery needs to understand the first step. That's our responsibility. Whether they agree with it is an entirely different matter. And it is not our job to badger them to agree that they should be here or that they have the problem that I do. It's just my job to lay it out.
Yeah, one more thing, let me add to that.
Please.
I like these animal shows sometimes. I like to watch, they do really good documentaries on animals. And if you ever watch one with elephants, elephants are conditioned as baby elephants to follow the mother, and then the mother will, push them along with her trunk. That's kind of what happened to me. I was conditioned to believe in a certain way and think a certain way. And I had all these preconceived thoughts and opinions about what I thought religion was like. For the simple fact is because when they went to church, they wore different hats. And then when they went home, they acted a different way. So my life I was really conditioned, just like a baby elephant was. I gotta outgrow that. I gotta mature. I got to have an understanding of how does God affect my life today? That's the question. How does he affect my life today? Differently than he did when I first got here. And I got to continue to grow in effectiveness and understanding of what his will is for me too.
All right, page 50, second paragraph. In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself. Samwise, anything? No? Go ahead, David.
Okay, so in our personal stories, we will find a wide varieties in which variations in the way each teller approaches and conceives the power which is greater than himself. That is one explanation for sure of what I really should be sharing from the podium. And I'm an offender of this. Trust me. Before I started studying this book, I just thought I could go up to the podium and share 40 minutes on my drunk-a-log and some of these seemingly funny stories. And then a little bit about what it was like, what happened the last day I drank. And then what it's like now, I'm like, I got 5 minutes left. Shit. And then I there's no message in that. And I've done that. But again, let me read that paragraph, and then we're going to go to page 29, because there's another description of what I should be sharing from the podium, what I should be sharing at meetings. I mean, there's plenty of times to talk about those other things at a restaurant after the meeting, the coffee shop after the meeting. Page 50, second paragraph, as David just read. In our personal stories, we will find a wide variation in which way each teller approaches and conceives the power which is greater than himself. Go to page 29. For second full paragraph, each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. What were those things? Precise, specific, and clear-cut directions got me to a power greater than myself. I'm supposed to be describing how I established relationship with God. Why? Because this is what the steps are designed to do, to get me to a power greater than myself so that I stop playing God. David plays David, God plays God. And the bottom line here is what I found out is most of my amends were direct results of me playing God. Give that some consideration. That's really what it came down to. I just got done working with a guy who's making out his resentment list, and I see it black and white, and it's like it's true for me as it is for anyone else who does this thing. And another one of my sponsees called me today about another sponsee that he's working with, and he did his 4-step or his 5th step with my sponsee. And when they got done with his 5th step on the resentments, the guy was really bummed out. And he goes, "Why are you bummed out?" And he says, "Well, I see the truth in everything that I've done." You know what? When I see the truth, I get to see God. That's the best part. See, I don't have the ability to remove these defects of character from me. But where there is truth, there is God. That is a 5th step. That is all part of the 5th step. I can finally see the truth that I got to stop playing God. That I got to remove this, I can't do this. Selfishness needs to be removed from me. So am I open to these things as I learn this process of working through these steps as outlined in the big book, not outlined the way David would do it or anyone else for that matter, but outlined the way the big book gives us specific, precise, and clear-cut directions.
And I will keep myself from going on a jag, but only because I haven't soapboxed about this in a while. David brought up 4-step and 5th step. For the love of God, truly, for the love of God, the 4th step is a celebration. I say this all the time. The next time you're in a meeting, and hopefully you're in a church basement, and somebody announces they are on working on their 4-step, and then some jerks in the room say, "Oh, your 4-step, it's so hard." Grab that person and throw them out the window, which is why I said I hope you're in the basement so you don't end up killing anybody. I cannot stand when those jerks say things like that, because then newcomers get scared and they don't want to do their 4-step. The 4th step is a freaking celebration. When I wrote that last column, I got so free because for the first time, I saw what the book told me, that I caused my own problems. Self was the root of all my problems, right? All my troubles were of my own making. There was so much power in that. And I couldn't wait to get into 5 to share that with my sponsor. And then 6 was a breeze for me because, man, looking at that column, I was entirely ready, right? Boom, 4, 5, 6. It's a celebration. Tell those people, drag them aside, grab them by their lapels and say, "Shut up." You're going to kill somebody with that kind of feedback. This is a celebration. Like, get into this. Be free. Be free. I learned in that last column, I never had to be that guy again. That is freedom. Until I knew who that guy was, who old David was, I couldn't be free of him. As soon as I learned, I was entirely ready to be new David.
As Rob pointed out there, is in animation, rocketed into a 4th dimension, I think is what is, yeah. That's just it there. But back in that paragraph again, it talks about experiences taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not to be worried. Well, we learn a little bit about worried when we're doing our resentment, when we're doing our retire at night, when we do our 11-step inventory. And it talks about it on page 86 in the first full paragraph. I won't read the whole paragraph. I'll just jump right in the middle of it. But we must be careful not to drift in worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. Why is that worry a problem? Because because when I'm worried, I'm operating on self-reliance. I'm not operating on God reliance. This is about God reliance. I invite him in all day long. It's insane, like how this becomes second nature when you practice it and you start to have faith that this works no matter what. I can call on that power anytime I want. He doesn't give me a number and say, "Stand in line, I'll get to you when I get to you." He just shows up when I concede. Please come in.
And back to this paragraph, let's just beat this up a little bit more. All of these considerations, this is a huge theme of Bill in this chapter. He's saying, please don't get lost wandering in the desert on these matters. Don't try to go on some obtuse, self-led spiritual quest to figure out what is my way, what is God, how do I define God? How could I possibly define God when God is everything? What Bill is saying is, please, we all get there. And how do we get there? We get there by beginning to be a little willing, to lay aside a little prejudice, and then get busy into work. I was talking to somebody today, somebody who's new, and he's trying to figure out if he's an alcoholic, and he's trying to figure out if he wants to come to meetings and all of this stuff. And he's like, well, that this system, spirituality. And I'm like, man, how's that been working for you? How about try something different? And I know sometimes I can come off patronizing, so I take care not to do that. I try not to do that in my tone, try to keep everybody on the same level here, but I start going in circles. But, and I'm like, good Lord, let's do something different. Something's missing. It's just like Dr. Jung said to Roland, great that you are not a churchman. Great. But your relationship with God and the way you were practicing your faith wasn't adequate to give you the vital spiritual experience. This is what we all desperately need. And that's what this is saying. We all had our own spiritual experience, our own spiritual awakening, our own journey. But how did we do it? Together with our fellows in our fellowship, and followed the instruction manual. Don't try to go and do this another way. Please. It's so simple. We only get in our own ways. Paragraph 123 on page 50. On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. This power has, in each case, accomplished the miraculous, humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. Sam Wise, anything? No? Okay. So what this, again, these paragraphs are just flowing one into the next. So what he's saying here is going back to the last paragraph. Remember, doesn't matter that we all had different ways to have our vital spiritual experience to get to understand and come to believe in spirituality. However, even though we had different ways, there's one way in which we're all in agreement, and that is all of us have gained access to and believe in a power greater than himself, right? That is the universal. Guys, this is the fundamental. This is, in one, I'm powerless. In two, I'm coming to believe in some power. And in 12, the culmination of my first formal move through the works, but this, continues for a lifetime. It's to have a spiritual awakening. A spiritual awakening, right, means I've given myself over to this spiritual being, and I'm now serving his purpose. This is the whole reason why we're here in 12-step recovery. It's not to show up in meetings. It's to find a power, and then it's to help other people find power. Right? And this power has, in each case, accomplished the miraculous. What's the miraculous? It created new David out of old David. Old David had terrible, evil thoughts. Old David's heart was charcoal black. And old David's belly was filled with bad ideas and prejudices and awful behaviors. New David doesn't live that way. That is flipping miraculous in the humanly impossible. I was always loved. I had a good family. I was close with them. I always had a ton of friends. I always had a good network, girlfriends and things like that. People in my life who cared about me. They couldn't change me. Only something bigger than me could change me. Mute. You're on mute.
I turned off my video. The boot. All right. So David had read that paragraph, third one here. Back up one sentence. There are questions for each individual to settle for himself. What is that question? What is my conception of my higher power? Is he loving, tolerant, timely, forgiving? Whatever it is, mine's continually growing all the time. Then it says one proposition, so one idea. However, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Wait for the promise. This is the promise here. Every one of them has gained access to, believes in a power greater than himself. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. That's a promise. It should be circled, highlighted. And then it says, as a celebrated American statesman, that celebrated American statesman is Alfred E. Smith that they're talking about. He was the governor of New York State then. Then it says, let's look at the record. Well, let's look at the record when we're talking about how I establish a relationship with power. Go to meetings that are solution based and problem based. I need to be at both. Not completely problem based, not completely solution based, both. Page 17 tells me I need to have both parts equal. Bottom of page 17. So when I go to meetings, I need to hear how did God affect your life, and how has that power in your life changed you? I need to know that. I got to have that hope. Hope is a vision beyond my present circumstances. There's a chapter in the back of the book called Vision for You. That's what I should be talking about, for me anyways, in meetings, especially for the new person there. So the promises, every one of them is game. Every one of them. No, he's not leaving anybody out. It's not 99 out of 100. It's not 1 out of 10. Every one of them is gained access to this power by removing the pomp and the circumstance in their life later in the book, and believes in a power greater than himself. And it's not a human power. This power, capital letter, has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. That is a great promise.
Yeah, that's a good number reference there. How many is every one? It's all, right? Okay, so we're going to look at the record. Here's the record. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. I feel like we should break right there in that paragraph. This is a long paragraph. There's a lot in here. You have anything in that first part, Sam?
Yeah, I do. I have worldly, which is defined as experienced. So here are thousands of men and women experienced indeed. And then I have revolutionary, which is defined as a completion of a reoccurring cycle. In the sentence, they flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power and to do certain simple things, there has been a completion of a reoccurring cycle and change in the way of their thinking and living, or living and thinking.
I'm not sure that's the best definition for how it's being used there. See if there's
No.
something else about like large, mind-blowing, radical, something like that. Like a revolutionary or original novel, something like that. See what you got. Come back to us. So what is this saying? Actually, David, why don't you get us started here, man? Go ahead.
I was looking up something. Okay.
All right, then I'll start.
No, go ahead, please.
We'll ping pong. Okay. So so again, we're continuing these people who have all agreed in one point, right? Gained access to and believe in a power greater than themselves. So here are these 1,000 men and women experienced indeed in this proposition. Right? They flatly declare that since they've come to believe in a power greater than themselves, so because of this, they took this position, number one, is really step 2, okay? To take a certain attitude towards that power. Step 3, I know we haven't got there yet, right? But making a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of that higher power. And to do certain simple things, perhaps steps 4 through 9, right? High effort, conceptually simple though. So because they've done steps 2, 3, and 4 through 9, there has been a revolutionary change, a major upheaval. You guys know what a revolution is? We hear about this in like little Central American countries, stuff like that. What happens at a revolution, right? The guerrillas come in, they overthrow the government, and they take over. It's a complete change, right? New government comes into place. So revolutionary, it is like a revolution, so much has changed. So it's like a major change. In
I
their
have
way, go ahead, Sam. Yep.
I had the Rob sent me the definition,
No, thank you.
which is good. And it is also defined as extreme, radical, characterized by or producing radical changes.
There you go. So it's a radical change, right? It's a major change, the change of all changes. So there, because of steps 2, 3, 4 through 9, there's been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. I already talked about 27. I must go back to it because we're talking about revolutionary change. Go or don't go, because I'm going to tell you about it. We do this just about every week because this is one of the most important pages of the book. And my favorite paragraph, favorite page anyway, page 27, Roland Hazard is going to die or be locked up forever. He said, is there no exception? Well, like, can I not stop drinking? Dr. Jung said, yes, there are some exceptions. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge, revolutionary, one might say, emotional displacements and rearrangements, ideas, stuff in my head, emotions, stuff in my heart, and attitudes, those prejudices in my belly, which are once the guiding forces of the lives of David, are suddenly cast to one side and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate David, right? This is the revolutionary change. What's left in David if all of my thinking, feeling, and attitudes are changed? What's left? Only the outside. Everything inside me radically, revolutionarily, amazingly changed, miraculously changed. I am a completely new guy. Later, the book tells me I'm going to be reborn. This is the nature of revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. And no human power was able to do this for me, certainly not my own. And I thought I was a pretty powerful guy. I learned I was powerless. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, me and the people about me, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. Revolutionized my life. I did have power, not my power, God's power. I know peace because my brain is not, I don't have the committee, right? The shitty committee going crazy, having arguments between my ears anymore. Happiness, the opposite of the discontentedness, right? And sense of direction. Yeah, the good orderly direction that comes from God as I understand him.
So yeah, David talked about where the steps are at in this paragraph, and then the revolutionary change, which is internal. Yeah, maybe my checkbook got a little fatter. Maybe I'm doing again promotional work. Maybe I made the border crossing in bed with my wife, and she's sleeping with me now early in sobriety. Maybe all those wonderful things have taken place. But the things that need to change are all internal. This disease is internal, and the solution is internal. So the revolutionary change is now my insides are starting to match, or my outsides are starting to match my insides. Not dressing things up anymore. Not wearing two faces. And then as after the word revolutionary change, in their way of living, I underline the word living and thinking. I'm not going to go too far ahead because when we get into the 10-step promises, we start hearing about how we can trust our thinking. And living is throughout this whole book. Our way of living, they talked about in the preface, in the front of the book. Our way of living. That means they have found a better way to live. Directing through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous to get to a power greater than themselves. And then in the face of, and this is what must happen, this is what my bottom looks like. In the face of a collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of my human resources. So let's stop right there because on page 44, if you guys don't mind, hang on to that page, go to the bottom of page 44. I'm going to read this paragraph into page 45. I'm going to set up what they talked about earlier on in chapter 2, agnostics, because my agnosticism looks exactly like my alcoholism. They're not separate. That's just how they look. And then the bottom of page 44, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes of philosophies did not save us no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral, We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might. Self, will, but the needed power wasn't there. Here it is. Here's the tie-in. Here's the dot connecting. Our human resources, marshaled by the will, self-will, what? Were not sufficient. They failed utterly or completely. Why? Because lack of power. That was my dilemma. I had to find a power greater than ourselves, which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. And where we're going to find that? In this book. So back to page 45. In that fourth paragraph there, after our marshal by the will and the human resources, they found that a new power, circle the word new if you'd like, please. New power, this is a new relationship with God. It continues to be new as much. If I am praying and I am meditating in 11, if I am doing the prayer and meditation I'm supposed to be doing, because my beliefs tell me that my actions will tell me what I believe, and I believe that I need to connect to that power, and meditation is part of that. A new power, a new peace, a new happiness, and a new sense of direction. All new. If you want to put new in front of that, that's fine. That's how I say it. I'm not rewriting the book. It doesn't need to be rewritten. But all these things are new, and a new sense of direction flowed into them. And what that kind of means to me, if I put a nice little bow on it, is if you take the bedevilments on page 52, and you take the contrasting 9-step promises, right? You guys have seen that? Rob will probably pull that up. They're just I mean, the 9-step promises are a little flowery, and everybody says those be promises. You know, I study with Howard and Kathy, and I kind of agree that they're observations, but at the same time they're still promises, I guess. So they're promises, but they contrast against the bedevilments. And if I do this work, I will get those benefits. I will have those promises. I'll have all these promises, and I'll have this new power, new peace, new happiness, and new sense of direction, and it will flow in. And that's how I feel all day long. And Mark Houston uses one example too. And you guys probably figured out I love listening to David and I listen to a lot of Mark Houston, Joe Hawk, Joe and Charlie, Katie, Charlie Parker, the Ramers. I listen to tens of thousands of hours of that stuff. You know, Hightower, all these guys. Done it for years and years. I love listening to speakers who are motivating, who come out of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But it's like being in church all day is what Mark Houston says. And I don't know necessarily what it's like to be in church all day. I've never done that before, been in church all day. But what I'm trying to say is I am free of self. When I am free of self, everyone around me is good because I'm not playing God. And I don't need to play God in anybody's life. I just get to be a child of God, an agent of God, one that works on behalf of another. That is such a blessing to have that feeling, that emotion all day long. And that's the direct result of the work of these steps for me.
All right, let's wrap up this paragraph. Squeeze it in. Let's see. So in the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. That's where we left off. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important facts of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. Samwise?
Yep, I have I have futility, which is defined as uselessness or pointlessness. And then also faith. I have that defined as complete confidence, trust, belief without proof. So in the sentences, once confused and baffled by the seeming uselessness and pointlessness of existence, they show the underlying reason why they were making a heavy going of life. And then with faith, when many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness, the awareness also, I like to define it as, of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives. They present a powerful reason why one should have complete confidence, trust, and belief without proof.
So some of these paragraphs I read sort of evenly, and some of them, when a really important one like this, I read with lots of feeling, as you guys hear, right? Because Bill is doing his selling here. He's winding up. He's saying, lay aside. He's saying, come around. But now he's driving to this conclusion that it's almost like he's saying, look, stupid. Everybody else who gave this a shot got better. Join us on the broad highway. Get better. These people of faith, or these people that found faith, got healthy. It's the most important thing in their lives. Why not give yourself the opportunity to have the same experience? Go ahead, David. You're on mute.
Okay, I'm doing that quite often. All right. So the bottom of that paragraph where David said that this happens soon as a timeline. After they wholeheartedly, meaning that they were honest and thorough about wanting to do this, met a few simple requirements. Those are the steps. And once confused and baffled by the seemingly futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they're making heavy going of life. So hold that page if you would, and go back to page 47 in the bottom paragraph where it starts with besides a seeming inability, and see why we were making heavy going of life. So bottom of page 47, fourth paragraph, all the way to the bottom. Besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith, top of page 48, we often found ourselves handicapped by, here's why we're making heavy going of life: obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Right? And why we're making heavy going of life here. And then it says, leaving aside the drink question. So the drink question, so it's not about not drinking. This is not a not drinking program. This is not about that. It's a spiritual program of action. So leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. That is untreated alcoholism. That is unmanageability. That is the spiritual malady. All those things are the same thing. And then they say here, and this is going to be a fact, they show how the change came over them. Here's the fact. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today is the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. I don't know how to add anything more to that paragraph other than saying, this is the first 100's experience. This is a fact. That's all I got there.
And then 1939, it was hundreds, right? Maybe the first printing was 100, I don't know. And then second hundreds. Guys, we know this is way more than that now. Now it's thousands. Now it's tens of thousands. Now it's hundreds of thousands. Dare we say millions, right? We're supposed to have a couple million people in AA and however many people in all the other anonymous programs. So how many of us have come to this point that we're able to say the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives? What is the opportunity for us as fellows is to go help those other millions of people who can't say this today. How about those people that have been coming to meetings for a year? How about those people coming to meetings for 5 years, for 10 years? They're just banging around, showing up, filling a seat, that they couldn't honestly look you in the eye and say they've had this experience, right? This is our duty. This is our obligation. It's in the 12th step. Carry this message to people struggling with alcoholism or whatever their process or substance addiction is. Spending, eating, sex, whatever it is. We got to help in our fellowships. We are in the business of helping people get to God so they save their lives. We're not in the results business. We can't produce results. But we can work our tails off to try to help people get to God.